All right, so I am Dr. Stephanie Daniel, one of the faculty fellows for CETO, and my focus is on best practices in online instruction, as you can see. And so today we're going to be talking a little bit about feedback fundamentals, providing meaningful support in your online courses.
Okay.
So our learning objectives, I always like to have learning objectives because it kind of shows you, the purpose of the professional development, what you're getting from it, why it's important. And it kind of shows you how things align. So we're going to identify and apply at least 2 specific strategies for providing constructive feedback that promotes student development and engagement. Demonstrate 2 strategies for providing constructive feedback by applying them to sample student work. Explore and utilize at least 1 tool or technique for delivering timely and personalized feedback to students in an online learning environment. And so it's when I say demonstrate, identify, explore, and we're actually going to be doing these things. We're not going to be doing it with the actual student, but we are going to get different activities that helps us see why these items that we are identifying is important, especially when working in an online environment. Because, I've been saying in the sessions that I've been given, it's easy for students to get lost and feel isolated when they are taking asynchronous courses because everything is done in a learning management system. And so we want our students to feel like they are a part of a community, even though they can't actually touch a person. They can see them if they join like a Zoom session, but it's a difference from being in a face-to-face class as opposed to being in an asynchronous class. And so that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today. So the importance of feedback in online courses. So the great thing about feedback, if it's constructive feedback, if it's feedback that has some meaning and it's intentional, it bridges the distance gap in an online education. And so that's one of the reasons why that very first week of class, we do things like introduce yourself, because we're trying to build that community of learners. One, we want our students to know, hey, I am a real person. I am your instructor. I am very active in the class, even though you may not be able to physically see me. It enhances students' engagement and motivation when they feel a sense of connectiveness. They are more eager to interact with their peers. They're more eager to interact with you because they see you are being very active in the class. And that kind of helps with the motivation as well. Clarifies expectations and performance standards. Again, that speaks to the feedback that we give them. We'll talk a little bit about that on their assignments. We provide specific examples if they're doing something that needs a little bit more improvement. If they're doing something that's great, we tell them what they did that was great so they can keep it up. And so we just really be intentional about the feedback that we're giving them. And then promote self-reflection and improvement. And at some point, we want our students to be able to do that. They can look at, oh, okay, I noticed I did this wrong, or I noticed you said I needed to respond to 2 students, and those responses need to be 40 words, and I also need to provide a resource or give that student a suggestion. And I know I didn't do that in my last discussion response. So I know what I need to do to improve going forward. And so that all comes from that feedback you give them. And the hopes is that when you give them that feedback, they're actually going in and looking at it. And so we'll talk a little bit about that too, because we can give them all this feedback, but do they really go and look at it sometimes? We know we have some students who may not, but for the most part, students do look at what you're saying when you do provide that constructive feedback. So this is a little activity, and I'll take you to the screen to show you it a little bit more, but I want you to kind of think about, your online classes, if you teach online classes or even your face-to-face classes. What strategies do you use to close the distant gap in online instruction and connect with your students? So think about your role. How do you close that gap? And if you scan the QR code, it will take you to an activity where you can actually post your response, or since you're unmuted, you can just tell me what your response is.
Okay.
This is our little activity. And so this is
Okay.
one of the activities that I usually do with students, because sometimes, we're in an online environment. And so I want different ways to kind of connect with students, to get them collaborating with each other, to get them communicating with each other. And so we can use outside sites as opposed to always using our same old discussion form. And so
Right.
this is one of the little activities that I would do with them, maybe ask them a question, open-ended question, and then have them post their response. And then it's another way for them to kind of communicate and collaborate with each other. So had you posted something using that QR code, it would have popped up here, and then others would have been able to see it. And that's how the conversation gets going.
Okay.
All right. So characteristics of effective feedback. What does that look like? Okay, so we want to think about things like when we're grading our assignments, making sure that it's timely. I always tell my students, and it's in the syllabus in the beginning of the semester, once the assignments close on Sunday, 7 days, a week to get that feedback to you. I usually try to do it sooner, depending on the assignment, because sometimes our assignments build on each other. And so students need that feedback quickly before they can do the next assignment. So usually when I'm teaching classes, I set Monday and Tuesdays. The assignment closed on Sunday. Monday and Tuesdays are the days that I really focus on trying to grade their assignments so that they can get that feedback as soon as possible. Specific things that I address when I say good job, or when I see something that they need improvement on. I give some examples. I try to use the information that is in their assignment. So for example, in my classes, we do a lot of lesson plan writing. And so one of the things that I know that students struggle with is writing objectives and writing goals for the lessons that they are creating for the children that they're going to be working with. And so one of the things that I do is that, if they did it great, I say, great job. I notice you have all three parts to your learning objectives. You have the condition of performance, the behavior, and the level of performance. If I notice that there's room for improvement, I'll still start off with, you're on the right path. I see you're progressing, but these are the things that you need to include or you are missing. And then I give them an example of what that should look like. But then I also found that when we give this information to students, a lot of times our students don't know exactly where to find our feedback that is given, because there are layers in the grading center. The time they look at that very first layer. Okay, I see your feedback here, but then they don't peel the layers back to see the additional feedback that is embedded in their assignment. So one of the things I decided to do was create a video that showed them how to go in and find that layered feedback that professors give them on their work. Not just on that top surface, but you got to dig a little bit deeper to see the feedback that is given, because there could be valuable feedback that you're not looking at, and you go to do another assignment and you're still doing it the same way because you haven't looked at that additional feedback that was provided. And so those were that was one of the things that I did for my online classes, is create that video to show students how to go and find, that additional feedback that is given out on top of what's on that main page in the grading center. Very intentional, that constructive feedback, offering those suggestions for improvement. I do highlight their strengths. I like to use what is called the praise sandwich. Start with something good, tell them what they need to work on, and then end with something good, because that helps them see, at least I'm making progress. I've done some things right, but I also have some things that I need to continue to work on.
Right.
And then the actionable piece, that give clear guidance for future tasks. That's that example that we're giving them, depending on the work that they're doing, so that they have something tangible that they can go back and look at when they're working on that next activity. So another little activity, and it's just a question: what's your preferred method for giving constructive feedback? So what does that look like? Do you meet with students and say, hey, on a one-on-one basis, this is the feedback I'm going to give you? Do you put it in the grading center? But when you put it in the grading center, do you also let them know where to find that additional feedback? And so this is another little activity that I like to do with students to kind of get them thinking. And so if you scan that QR code, it will take you to another site. And let me pull it up so you can see it. And so this is another outside site that I can embed, and we can embed in Canvas to use with our students. And it just asks a general question, that same question that I asked. That QR code takes them right to this page. And then what they do is they just click that green plus sign, and it opens up a little piece of paper that they can type their response on. And so again, another way to kind of that communication, that collaboration, that feedback, all that going on in your online classroom. Because again, we can get lost in online classes because we are separated from everybody. We're not actually physically meeting in a class. So this is another way to kind of keep students engaged and motivated in your classroom by giving them something different to do outside of always doing things in Canvas. Any questions so far?
So would this one be like an anonymous, or are there anonymous ones that the students might enjoy more because they wouldn't feel like, hey, if I post something stupid, I'm going to get laughed at?
Absolutely. So this they can post anonymously.
Okay.
It just, it pops up. Now, if it's something like I use this to give like extra credit. And so in order for them to, and it's something that, wouldn't make them feel uncomfortable, they wouldn't mind posting their name. I ask them, type your name at the bottom so that you can get the extra credit. But yes, this is one of those ones where it's anonymous. Awesome question. All right. Okay. So strategies for constructive feedback. I kind of already talked about this a little bit when I was giving the example. But my favorite is that feedback sandwich, that praise sandwich. You start with positive, you talk about what needs improvement, and then you end with something positive or encouraging. We always want to focus on the work and not the student. Definitely want to provide examples and explanations. Sometimes if it's too long of an explanation for me to type, I'll create a video. Students love when you create videos because they can actually replay it over again and they can hear what you're saying as opposed to reading it. And then ask those questions to prompt reflection. And that goes to that whole open-endedness. Ask them questions that really make them think about, how would you do things differently? What could you do to improve this assignment? And that goes to that whole self-reflection. Because at some point we want students to be able to self-reflect. Okay, this is what I have, this is what I need to change and I need to fix. And when they do that, they're not afraid to ask you questions. Once students feel comfortable based on the feedback that you're giving them, they will start to reach out to you and ask those questions up front. Hey, what do you think about this? And I love that because that's them being intentional and proactive. They want to get the feedback up front as opposed to waiting until it's time to grade the assignment and then they get, feedback that they may not necessarily want.
Right.
Another strategy that I use with my students is that all of my assignments are open. I do tell them, even though everything is open, you can submit it early for a couple of different reasons, but it won't be graded until actually the assignment officially closed. One of the reasons why I do that is I tell students that if you want me to look at your work up front and give you some feedback before you submit it for grading, I'm willing to do that. And so I have students, I do tell them there is a deadline. And so they have to give me that work to look at least 2 weeks before it is actually due. Because that's me trying to find time in my already busy schedule to now look at their work prior to it's time for it to be submitted and be graded. And so that is them working on it ahead of time. That is them being intentional. And that is me providing feedback that will help them think through their improvement before they submit the assignment.
Okay.
So these are just some tools that, kind of can help with that timely feedback. Of course, we have the learning management system, Canvas. Depending on the activities you do, Canvas will grade some of them for you. We definitely should be using rubrics and grading metrics, matrix to help with that feedback that we're given. I love the audio and video feedback tools. The students love it as well. Automated feedback for objective assessments. Again, Canvas can do those things. And then another one is peer review systems. And so using your students to give that feedback. Yes, we are still going to look at the work, but we want them to learn how to receive feedback as well as give feedback. And so some of the activities that I create in my class is where the students actually provide their peers that feedback. I also use templates. And so, the more we grade certain assignments, because we teach the assignments over and over again, my template becomes a Word document because some of the feedback is the same. There may be small things that you're going to personalize, okay? Because we definitely want to make sure we're personalizing feedback. So of course, we always
Right.
use the student's name at the beginning or at some point in that feedback that you are providing, letting them know, hey, I got the right person. I'm looking at the right person's work. But then it also personalizes that feedback that you're giving them. You could also use small group feedback sessions. This could be done via Zoom because, again, we're in an asynchronous learning environment. We're not going to ask somebody to, hey, meet us at Starbucks or meet us on campus. We can do that in Zoom, especially if it's on something that we know everybody in the class, so the majority of everybody in the class are struggling with. So having like a small group session, if it's a situation where students can't attend, you can record it. And so that way you can pop it into one of your modules and they can go back and they can look at that group session where you are talking through some of the feedback that you are providing on that activity or a piece of that activity that everybody seems to be struggling with. Okay, so here's another little activity. So it just said, access, share examples of personalized feedback you have provided using your chosen method for delivering constructive feedback. And so again, this just takes you to another little activity that I like to do with students because I feel like we always have to think outside the box. And so the way that it looked, this is Slido. A lot of these, I will say, are free. Slido is the only, I think Slido is free too. But same QR code, and it's a poll, and it just asks that statement, share some examples, and then what happens is you use the plus sign and you add your responses. And students, again, enjoy doing activities like this, all anonymous, unless they choose to put their name on the activity. But these three are definitely ones that are free and doesn't cost a lot. And the one thing I like about this activity is that you can import it into a PDF, export it to a PDF. And so let's say if it's something, again, students are struggling with, and you have all this information that you want to share with them, you can turn it into a PDF, pop it into your Canvas course for later use.
Yeah, I like that. That's going to be useful.
Yeah, I love, and I can pop these web address. They're actually in the hub, I believe, because I use these a lot, especially the ideas board. But if not, I can pop the links into the chat, and so that way you can open them up so you have them and you can go in and just create them, create whatever you need.
Oh, thank you.
I usually use it for like midterm semester. And so, we always
Mhm.
ask students for feedback at the end of the semester, and, it's kind of late now.
Right.
Ideas board, I use it for mid-semester feedback. Hey, tell me what you would like for me to keep doing. Tell me what you would like for me to stop. Tell me what you want to add. And so it helps to kind of get that feedback, because it could be a situation where the students feel like I'm sending too many emails, and they want me to stop because I'm just overwhelming them with the emails that I send them.
Right.
And that helps because that's something that I can stop immediately in that class. And so Ideals Board is a great one to use to kind of get that mid-semester feedback from students. Encouraging student engagement with feedback. Okay, so require students to respond to feedback. I tell my students all the time, I am very active in Canvas in their online class, probably more active than what they would like me to be. But again, it is so that they can feel like they are in a community and that they have an instructor, professor who's there for them during that class. And so sometimes when I provide them feedback, I may ask them a question in that feedback, and I want them to respond to that question, because that lets me know, one, they actually looked at what I said. So it's being intentional. They actually looked at what I said and my feedback to them to kind of help them improve on something that they may be struggling with in the class. I also give them the opportunity to revise assignments to improve their grade. Because again, a lot of what they do in our classes, I teach early childhood education. It kind of builds on prior classes,
Mhm.
prior classes. So, for example, lesson plans. Lesson plans, they write lesson plans in multiple classes. Once they get to like their capstone, they are putting together a whole bunch of lesson plans. And so at some point, I want to be able to see where in the beginning they were struggling, but now they're in class number 7 or 8 and they're doing really well with their lesson plan writing. And so I give them the opportunity to revise activities to improve their grade. This is being intentional, but you have to do it because you don't want to overwhelm yourself. We have a lot on our
Right.
plate as professors. We normally teach 5 classes, especially if we're full-time faculty. And so you don't want to overwhelm yourself, but you do want to help students be successful in the class. And so giving them the opportunity to revise, that kind of goes to that whole self-reflection. It allows them to see that you see potential in them and you are willing to work with them. So that is another way we can encourage, keep students engaged. Create feedback focused discussion forums. This is another way to kind of ask those open-ended questions. And you're going to have a brave soul that will respond to the question. All it takes is one person, and then others will follow along with those discussion forums that you have. Use feedback to inform future lessons and activities. Of course, I've been saying that since beginning. We definitely should be doing this in the feedback that we're given, because some of those activities may build on future things that they need to do in other classes. And so we want to make sure that we're being intentional about the feedback that we're given, that it is constructive feedback and that it has meaning to it. So, overcoming challenges in online feedback. Okay. Managing time effectively. Again, I know life for especially full-time faculty can get overwhelming. If you're a program head, you have a whole lot on your plate that you are juggling. However, we still need to manage time to give effective feedback, to constructive feedback to our students. We don't want to just say, good job, good job, good job, good job. We want it to be intentional feedback, because whatever they're doing that is so great, we want them to continue it. Address maintaining consistency. I use a Word document where I put a lot of my feedback in it. So I'm looking at that feedback as I'm grading assignments. So I don't have to per se type every word over again,
Mhm.
but there are small things that I may be changing in that feedback. And so that kind of helps save time. There is a level of consistency because the students see, oh, she is very intentional about the feedback she's giving. She's not cutting any corners. It's, it's examples provided, all of that. Addressing technical issues. Sometimes we do run into technical issues, when Canvas doesn't want to work. That's why I know it's been a couple of times where when I graded assignments and the notes that I put in Canvas on the assignment, which is one of the reasons why I started putting them in a Word document, because it wiped it away. And I went and looked and I was like, I just put feedback here. Where's the feedback? And so that was one of the reasons why I started putting the feedback in the Word document first, so that all I had to do was go and copy and paste it when Canvas was on one of its days where it wasn't working. Ensuring clarity in written communication. Again, that is us being intentional and being specific about what we're saying. And those when we're responding and providing that feedback in our online environment. Because think about it, a lot of what students do in an online class is just read what you're saying. Right. If we have videos, if we're using videos to provide feedback, they can listen to those, but a lot of it is written. And so we have to make sure that we are very clear in our written communication when we are providing that feedback, and that clarity, when we are grading their assignments. Okay, so best practices for online feedback. Okay, set clear expectations from the start. When we think about, again, the feedback that we're going to give them, I gave the example of I opened all of my assignments from day one, even all the way up to the final project. But the students know, because I set clear expectations, I will not be grading this until it actually closes. If you want me to look at it to provide you with feedback before submitting it, email it to me and I will look at it, provide feedback, and get it back to you. I also give them a time of when I will get that back to them. That's a part of setting those clear expectations, because students feel like, oh, I've submitted it, so now you need to grade it, and that is not the case. Establish a regular feedback schedule. I usually tell my students up front, I send emails out maybe every other 2 weeks, because again, I don't want to overwhelm them with emails. And they are just weekly check-ins to see how things are going, because it is so easy for students to take multiple classes, and the face-to-face classes, because that professor is there, they can interact with that professor. They focus more on those classes, and then they forget about their online classes. So I try to be intentional about being in their space and face as much as their face-to-face professors, and that comes through that regular feedback schedule that I have set up, and I let them know that up front. This is what's going to happen, and I look for a response back from you, because that let me know that you are still active in the class, that you have taken the time to read the email that I sent, and I usually send it right from the grading center after grading an assignment, or from Canvas. Continuously seek student input on feedback and effectiveness. That goes to that mid-semester evaluation that I pop into Canvas for students to do. I tell them it's a way for them to earn some extra credit. What they do is they just let me know, because I do want it to be anonymous. I want them to freely express how they feel about how things are going in the class, because again, that helps me be intentional about changes that I need to make at that moment, or changes that I need to make going forward in future classes. So I take the feedback very seriously. Okay, and then these are just some additional resources to kind of support why that feedback, effective feedback, is important in an online environment. And so when we think about interactions in our online courses, this is an article that that you can read. Facilitating successful online discussions, that's another one. And then using peer feedback to enhance the quality of student online postings. Because again, they not only learn from the professor, but they learn from their peers. A lot of our students, they already work in early childhood education with young children. And so I love when they share some of the things that are going on in their environment, because I'm not in the classroom anymore. And so I don't know what's happening. And so when they can hear it from someone else, it just enhance the learning environment. And the feedback is so amazing when they start to really conversate with each other as if they were in a face-to-face classroom. So these are just some additional resources to kind of support all that I have shared in this presentation. And now there is time if you have any questions that you want to ask.
Yeah, so you were talking about revision opportunities, and I like that. I really want to incorporate that. Um, what kind of restrictions do you have on that? Like, hey, it has to be done within a week, or
Mm-hmm.
you get like one chance or two chances to revise it. Um,
Yeah.
what-
So yes, we do want to put restrictions on it because you don't want, okay, you give them one chance. So you tell them this will be a one-time revision. Okay. If you want, and you can even tell them if you want to meet to further discuss what that revision should look like, what you are missing, you can also do that. And that is something that I do with the students. They ask, okay, can we meet via Zoom? Yes, we can. And so we talk through what they missed. And a lot of times what I have found in just having those conversations with the student, they overanalyze. They think really broad and they have the right concept, but it is so broad and they need to narrow it down. And so after
Mhm.
having that conversation with them, I say, okay, you have 1 week. And so you can set that deadline because in Canvas, we say the assignment will close again on
Right.
this date. And if you have not turned in the revision, then the grade you have is the grade that you will keep.
Okay.
So yeah, you do have to set some expectations because you do have students who will say, okay, they're gonna keep on trying to push the button. And if one time is what I'm giving you. If you want to meet to kind of talk through what those revisions look like, let's do that before you start on them.
Okay.
And
Do you
that
have
is
students
giving
that
that.
like submit them, like do revisions like constantly, or is it typically like, hey, they'll do it once or twice in a semester?
Once or twice in a semester.
Okay.
And what I usually do is I look at like major assignments, something
Okay.
that will lead up to like their final project that they have to do. Those are the ones that I look at. And that's what I tell them.
Okay.
I have a lot of low stakes, a lot of assignments in the class that helps build their final grade. And so the ones that are like, okay, this is worth 100 points. Those are the ones that I look at for those revisions,
Okay.
especially if I know it's something that they're going to do or do similar in another class, like it's going to build on something for another class.
Okay. Another question I had, you were talking about the peer review system. So would that be like doing the Canvas responses to discussion boards?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes. Yep, I do. I teach a math, science, and social studies class for um young children. And one of the activities students have to do is they have to put together a math activity that they will give to parents for parents to use at home. And so the way I tell them to look at their peer review is that they are parents and they're going to look at because they have to post the activity, they have to post the instructions, the letter that they're giving their parent, and the students who review it is that parent who would get that letter, read that letter, and do that activity with their child at home if they have kids. And so they provide constructive feedback about this is great. However, this is what I think. I tell them, give them suggestions. Don't just say it's great. Tell them why it's great, or if you see something that needs improved, be respectful when you say this is missing. I like the way you did this, but this is missing. These are the things that I suggest you add. And I love the feedback that they give each other because it is intentional feedback because they already work with little kids, so they know
Right.
what they should have or shouldn't have when they are giving it to their parents. I had one student, we were talking about objectives that will go into a lesson, and her response to one of her peers was that, this is a great start to your objective, but I noticed that it's really not measurable. So you may want to make it more specific and measurable. And I was like, oh,
Right.
she gets it. And so it's feedback that helps them improve without being disrespectful.
Okay. Have you ever thought, or had a chance to use like a feedback group where you might assign like 3 or 4 students to a group to kind of review each other's papers and do that way? It's kind of like instead of submitting it to us to review, they would do it themselves and then send it to us.
Absolutely. You can do that right in
Okay.
Canvas. So you can do I think it's called collaborations. It's a tab and you can build those little groups. You can build it where they can choose the groups that they want to be in, or you can choose the groups that they're going to be in. But
Okay.
yeah, they can submit it right in Canvas and they can provide that feedback to each other right in Canvas.
Cool. Yeah, I'm still learning a lot about how to use Canvas and get it set up and get going in that. So
Absolute.
I've
Canvas
got
is
the fundamentals, but
Yeah, Canvas is so much better than Blackboard. I love, love, love Canvas because there are so many cool things that you can do. It just takes time. It's a process. And
okay.
so when I do these sessions, I always say baby steps because every semester I learn something new that I incorporate in my class. So baby steps.
I remember when, as a student, switching from Canvas or Blackboard to Canvas, I was like, well, I don't see what the difference is. Why did we do this? Now I'm seeing why we did it because Canvas is a lot more versatile.
It is. It really is. I love it. All right. Any
Well,
other
thank
questions?
you. No, thank you very much. This has been very useful.
Okay, so I'm gonna really quick pop those links in the chat for you, so that you can have them just for future references. I'm gonna stop recording because we are done.